These places shouldn't exist on Earth, but they do. Places where objects turn to stone right before your eyes, where entire villages disappear overnight, where lightning strikes even when the weather is clear. These are real locations that still baffle scientists. Who or what created them? Nature? Forgotten civilizations? Or something else entirely? The reality might not be what we think it is. Mysterious places that people can't explain. Take a look at Africa from space, and you'll see that it looks right back at you, with an eye, a real one. And it's not a joke. Deep in the Sahara Desert, near the settlement of Oudane, lies a mysterious formation. Officially, it's called the Richat structure, but unofficially, it's known as the Eye of the Desert, or the Bullseye. And once you see it, you'll understand why. The Richat structure was first described by French geologists in the 1930s to 1940s. But the first photographs of the site were taken in 1965 by NASA's Gemini 4 mission crew. They were actually searching for meteorite impact sites on Earth's surface. Initially, this strange eye was classified as a meteorite crater. However, further studies disproved that idea. When a meteorite strikes the ground, it leaves behind a characteristic impact crater. But the floor of the Richat structure is flat. Moreover, after an explosion, molten rock fragments called impactites scatter in all directions. Yet there are no such fragments around Richat. So it's not a crater. But what is it then? There are plenty of theories, some more fantastical than others. One bold hypothesis suggests that Richat is actually the lost Atlantis, just as Plato described, a round island in a lake. The Atlanteans attempted to pierce the Earth with an energy beam using a certain artifact. Something went wrong and, well, you got the idea. There's also another theory that it's a trace left by an alien space laser. But let's set aside the wild speculation. What could have actually created such a perfectly circular formation? Of course, an ancient volcano. But the eye consists of rings that protrude above the surface. These rings vary in diameter, height, and color. This is not typical for a volcano. Still, there is some truth to this idea. Geological research has confirmed that the Richat structure is a geological dome, a deformed rock structure, or rather, what's left of it. More than 100 million years ago, magma erupted from the Earth's mantle here. The whole thing bulged, swelling up like a hot bubble. Then it cooled down, forming a massive 31-mile wide dome. Over time, erosion and the harsh desert winds began to wear it down. And along with it, the sedimentary layers also began to break down. The softer rock layers eroded more quickly, while harder layers remained, forming the distinct concentric ridges that give the Richat structure its unmistakable eye appearance. This theory of the Eye of the Sahara's origin is now considered official. However, it does not explain why such an eye appeared specifically in this location. Scientists continue to investigate, and it seems that Richat still has plenty of secrets to reveal. But let's move on to another site teeming with mysteries, the Medveditskaya Ridge. The Medveditskaya Ridge is located in Russia on the northeastern part of the Volgograd region. It's a narrow 12-mile-long valley surrounded by hills. According to countless eyewitness reports, this place is brimming with paranormal activity. However, the evidence is mostly anecdotal. There aren't enough photos or videos, and the ones that exist are questionable. But still, what's going on there? For starters, there's a particular spot on the ridge known as Blue Mountain, or more dramatically, the Slope of Furious Lightning. And for good reason. Lightning allegedly strikes the slope even in clear weather. Some claim that ball lightning is to blame, emerging straight from the ground and setting trees on fire. Speaking of trees, have you seen the ones here? On the local hilltops, the birch trees look as if they're trying to tie themselves into knots. As you see, they're all twisted, crooked, with bare charred trunks. And then there are tunnels. According to local legends, the ground beneath the ridge is riddled with mysterious underground passages. Most have collapsed over time, but one still remains accessible. However, those who enter it reportedly experience overwhelming panic and ear-piercing noise. Add to that malfunctioning equipment, crop circles, and of course, UFOs. After all, what would such a place be without them? It's an ultimate paranormal hotspot and a real paradise for ufologists, full of unexplainable phenomena. But are they really unexplainable? Not entirely. There's one key feature of Medveditskaya Ridge that debunks half of the paranormal claims. The fact is, the soil here has an unusually high concentration of iron. This could explain the electrical anomalies and the crop circles in the areas with excessive iron content. As for electrical devices, they act up too. But what about the twisted trees? That mystery is easier to solve. The trees grow on high hills, exposed to extremely strong winds. The phenomenon isn't unique and is known as krumholz, or crooked forest growth. What's hard to explain are the tunnels, and also the frequent sightings of UFOs. However, there's almost no documentation on them. Everything is based solely on the mysterious stories of rare eyewitnesses. By the way, speaking of mysterious stories, here's a chilling tale about a monster that resides in the depths of a dark lake. And no, we're not talking about the legendary Nessie. Lake Iliamna, located in southwestern Alaska, spans approximately 1,000 square miles with a maximum depth of 988 feet. According to the United States Geological Survey, citing an information bulletin from the village of Igiagig, the name Iliamna comes from the local indigenous language and refers to a mythical giant black fish that lives in the lake and gnaws holes in the kayaks of bad natives. Locals firmly believe that some kind of monster resides in the lake. It's said to capsize boats, snap fishing lines, steal catches, and cause havoc. If it weren't for its gigantic size and elusiveness, people would just attribute these incidents to some local wildlife. Lake Iliamna is teeming with life. It has plenty of fish and some freshwater seals, but none of these creatures are capable of such things. The monster, or perhaps monsters, as some people claim to have seen not just one but multiple creatures at once, are spotted there quite often. In the 1950s, a man named Gil Post and his 3 companions attempted to catch the monster, but lost their bait and even a steel cable in the process. Several pilots have reported aerial sightings of the creature from above, notably Tom Allsworth in 1959 and Tim Laporte in 1977. By this time, the creature had become so famous that in 1980, the Anchorage Daily News offered $100,000 to anyone who could prove its existence. As you might have guessed, the prize money remains unclaimed to this day. Despite this, the search continues. In 2021, Bruce Wright, a scientist specializing in top predators, and Mark Steiger, former head of the Alaska National Guard's Aviation Division, launched an expedition to track down the elusive beast. Both remain convinced that something unusual is lurking in the waters of the lake. But what exactly have witnesses seen, and what are enthusiasts searching for? The current description of the monster is as follows: a dark-colored fish-like creature with a flat head and immense strength. Those leaning towards scientific explanations have several theories. Either it's a Pacific sleeper shark, which could very well live in the lake, or giant northern pike, or white sturgeons. All of these, especially the sturgeons, can grow massive in size, making them a strong candidate for the legendary creature. For now, there is no definitive answer. The search continues, and perhaps one day, the mystery of the Lake Iliamna monster will be solved. But it seems that for the enthusiasts, the process of solving the mystery is even more exciting than the findings themselves. As for the next site, people visit it specifically to uncover some mysteries. And not just casual travelers, but respected researchers and experts from various scientific fields. Once again, we're talking about a crater. A seemingly ordinary one at first glance, but only at first glance. The so-called Patomskiy crater is located in Russia's Irkutsk region. It looks like a mound of stone blocks rising in the middle of the taiga. Standing 130 feet tall, it has a depression at the top and an odd circular hill in the very center of the depression. Wait a minute. What? A hill inside a crater? How was this strange formation even discovered? The Patomskiy crater was discovered in 1949 by geologist Vadim Kolpakov, who was sent there to create a geological map of the area and search for gold-bearing streams. Instead of gold, he stumbled upon this mound. Interestingly, the local Yakut hunters had known about it for quite a while. They called it the Nest of the Fire Eagle, a poetic name, but how did it actually form? This puzzle remains unsolved to this day. Every time someone proposes a hypothesis, another researcher debunks it. Vadim Kolpakov himself suggested that it was an impact site from a meteorite, but multiple scientific expeditions in the 20th century found no traces of meteorite material. So, if it didn't come from the above, could something have pushed it up from below? In the early 2000s, Irkutsk scientists conducted a chemical analysis of the rocks and made a surprising discovery. Yiktor Antipin, head of the Department of Geochemistry at the Irkutsk Institute, announced that the Patomskiy crater was actually a nascent volcano. Yes, it's in a low seismic activity zone, and no, it hasn't erupted lava, but gases are rising from underground through a channel, pushing the rock outward, forming the mound. A clear, logical, and plausible explanation, or so it seemed. That is, until 2008, when an expedition from the Russian Academy of Sciences conducted a geophysical survey and discovered a cylindrical object made of an unknown metal deep within the mound. Where could it have come from? The obvious answer? Space. The theory was that a meteorite had impacted the Earth, forming the crater. Then, this object encountered the very same gas coming from underground, which is now pushing it to the surface. This would explain the egg at the crater's center. The second theory proposed that this was a nascent volcano, while the third one suggested there was some metal object from space inside. Finally, a new hypothesis emerged, claiming it to be a cryovolcano that releases ice instead of lava. However, no one has been able to prove it. Let us remind you that cryovolcanoes have never been officially documented on Earth. Could this be the first and possibly the only example on our planet? Research is still ongoing. To definitively solve the mystery, scientists may need to drill through the entire crater. However, such an endeavor would require specialized technology. Speaking of technology, the capabilities of ancient civilizations never cease to amaze us. Pyramids, labyrinths, roads on the seabed. In 1968, 3 divers, Joseph Manson-Valentin, Jacques Mail, and Robert Engels, stumbled upon an underwater road off the coast of North Bimini Island. Yes, you heard that right. A real road, half a mile long, made of neatly arranged rectangular limestone blocks. The find became a sensation and sparked heated debates over its origins. Researchers split into 2 opposing camps. One group argued that the Bimini Road was a natural geological formation, while the other believed it to be man-made. Scientists quickly set out to study the road in detail, but they faced numerous challenges. It's quite difficult to study an object that lies at a depth of 10 to 16 feet, especially when battling strong currents and swatting away sharks and moray eels. Nevertheless, researchers collected samples and brought them to the surface for analysis. What followed was a long and painstaking attempt to determine the road's age. In 1978, the Geology Department of the University of Miami conducted a radiocarbon analysis, and it turned out that the road was about 3,500 years old. This corresponds roughly to the time when the island's coastline took shape. However, this age didn't satisfy those who believed the Bimini Road was built by humans. And not just any humans, but those who lived in Atlantis. Conspiracy theorists commonly argue that Atlantis sank around 12,000 years ago. The uranium-thorium analysis of the road's samples showed its age to be between 15,000 and 12,000 years old. Atlantis enthusiasts quickly embraced this study, but it turned out to be in vain. First, the structure of the analyzed limestone sample had already changed over time. It had partially recrystallized. However, uranium-thorium dating only works on samples that remain chemically unchanged. Second, 15,000 years ago, this area was not underwater. At the time, sea levels were significantly lower and the land was above surface. Meanwhile, the Bimini Road is made of marine limestone, which can only form underwater. This means it could not have possibly formed there during that period. Later, beneath the upper layer of stones from the road, a lower layer was discovered. The scientists found no evidence that the layers were stacked one on top of the other. They concluded that the Bimini Road consists of large, naturally occurring limestone blocks. This unusual structure is the result of erosion and ocean currents shaping the surface over time. Despite this, myth enthusiasts refuse to give up. They are convinced that several layers of rock couldn't have formed on their own. Perhaps it's not a road at all, but a wall. But then, where did similar structures appear in Tasmania, off the coast of Florida, in western Colorado, and so on? There's still no answer to this question. However, the next site is undoubtedly man-made. But, according to legend, divine forces also played a role in its creation. Let's start from the beginning. On the shores of the Arabian Sea, in modern-day India, lies the city of Dwarka, one of the 7 sacred pilgrimage sites in Hindu tradition. This city is linked to a legend, which can be found in the famous Indian epic, the Mahabharata. In short, the god Krishna, while creating his kingdom, borrowed land from the sea god and overnight built a magnificent capital, dazzling in its beauty and wealth. The only thing was that it was built on underwater land reclaimed by the ocean. You can probably guess what happened next. 7 days after Krishna's death, the city was swallowed by the sea. People then rebuilt Dwarka on the shore, though, of course, without its golden palaces and gemstone-paved streets. Another legend of sunken lands? Perhaps, but unlike others, this one is, in some ways, true. The first excavations in Dwarka began back in the 1960s, led by Pune's Deccan College. Archaeologists discovered an ancient temple and various artifacts. Then, in the late 1970s, renowned Indian archaeologist Dr. Shikharapura Ranganatha Rao arrived in Dwarka. While exploring the coastal zone, he discovered temples dedicated to the god Vishnu, but they were significantly older than those found further inland. That's when he likely remembered the legend. Excavations continued, and it soon became clear that at a depth of 131 feet underwater, there were indeed the ruins of an ancient submerged city. According to various estimates, these ruins date back to the 2nd to 14th centuries BC. Numerous artifacts, sculptures, wall fragments, and roads were found. In short, the legend turned out to be true. But why did the city sink? The answer is simple. Geological studies and aerial surveys confirmed that several thousand years ago, a major natural disaster did occur in this area. It started with an earthquake, followed by a tsunami. As a result, vast areas were submerged, including ancient Dwarka. Excavations and studies continue to this day, and the sunken city of Dwarka serves as a powerful reminder that myths and legends often have real historical roots. What other secrets does this place hold? Perhaps we'll find out in time. The origins of our next site remain a complete mystery. In 1992, Longyou County, located in China's Zhejiang province, a group of local farmers decided to drain 5 small ponds in their village. According to local legends, the ponds were bottomless and lifeless. There was no fish in them. After draining the ponds, it became clear that the legends weren't too far off. There was no wildlife. However, what was discovered underwater were 5 man-made caves, and later, another 19. This was not a natural phenomenon. The caves were clearly carved by human hands, displaying impressive knowledge of architecture. The caves are separate from each other, each with its own entrance. 3 of the walls of each cave are straight, while the 4th is inclined at a 45-degree angle. This design makes the structure more stable. Each cave's vault is supported by 3 pillars. The walls between adjacent caves are incredibly thin in places, only about 20 inches thick. As archaeologists and researchers continued studying the site, they were left with more questions than answers. The caves are enormous. Each has an average area of over 1/4 of an acre. How could such a large-scale construction exist without a single mention in historical records? Yes, China is an ancient civilization, and some records may have been lost over time, but the caves are believed to be over 2,000 years old, and they spent centuries submerged underwater. Not to mention, earthquakes sometimes occur in this region, so how have the caves remained perfectly intact, as if they were built yesterday? Adding to the mystery, the walls and columns are covered in uniform, broad chisel marks, all of identical width. This means the Chinese in the 200s AD were quite advanced engineers. But then the big question arises. Why build 24 identical caves with separate entrances? Researchers find this question particularly intriguing. They thought tombs, perhaps? But there were no traces of graves or human remains. How about sacrificial sites? There were neither altars nor ritual tools. Military bunkers? But why decorate them with intricate carvings and statues? Doesn't seem likely. Perhaps palaces? Then why build so many, all identical? To this day, no theory about the origins of the Longyou caves has been proven. Some of the caves have been turned into tourist attractions, and they are occasionally used for musical performances. Well, that's a rather fitting use for a mystery with a lost past. Speaking of tourist attractions, let's talk about one of the oldest landmarks in the United Kingdom. It all started with a legend. In 15th century North Yorkshire, there once lived a witch. She could predict the future and also owned a strange well. Anything that touched its waters turned to stone. Centuries passed, the witch was long gone, but the well remained just as magical. Now, let's get back to reality. There really was a woman in England named Ursula Sonthiel. better known as Mother Shipton. She was a psychic. People often visited her, and they also looked at the well near her home. The well resembled the skull of a giant, and its water really did turn objects into stone. The well and its properties were first mentioned in historical records in 1534 after the death of Mother Shipton. By 1630, a man named Charles Slingsby acquired the site. A sharp businessman, he quickly turned the well into a paid attraction. He began charging people to see the well, and that's how it became one of the oldest tourist destinations in Britain. But if we put magic aside, what actually causes teddy bears to have a stone crust in about a month and a half? Scientists first examined the well's water in the late 19th century by simply weighing it. A pint of this water turned out to be heavier than usual. It had a lot of dissolved minerals. Modern science has finally put an end to this mystery. The crust is not actually stone, it's salt deposits. The water, which rises from a depth of about 0.9 miles, erodes the mountain rock, which is rich in limestone. Essentially, this is a natural mineral well, and that's the whole secret. And this is probably the only place on our list with a somewhat clear explanation. A simple solution to a beautiful legend. But this hasn't stopped people from flocking to the site for centuries. Visitors come from around the world to see the petrified hat, bicycle, and even a stone statue of Mother Shipton herself. And so Charles Slingsby's business lives on to this day. From magic, we move on to mysticism. The real enigma of this story is whether it even happened at all. The events are said to have taken place in 1930. By then, people already had the means and skills to investigate strange occurrences, yet in this case, human capabilities proved insufficient. So we're in northern Canada near Anjikuni Lake. The area is sparsely populated, if not almost deserted. Only indigenous peoples, the Inuit, lived here permanently. One well-known Inuit village was located near Anjikuni Lake. Fur hunters would occasionally stop by, and then in 1930, a hunter named Joe LaBelle decided to visit the Inuit on his way. Instead, he found no one. The tents were still there, needles stuck out of unfinished shirts. Food remained untouched, yet the people were gone. About 25 residents had vanished in broad daylight. LaBelle searched the area and found sled dogs that had starved to death. He also discovered a disturbed grave. It should be noted that the Inuit hold graves in great respect. Desecrating graves is considered a serious sacrilege. Could the animals have dug up the grave? No. The stones around the grave were neatly arranged. At that point, Joe LaBelle decided he couldn't continue playing the Lone Ranger and went to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP. They responded, conducted a search, and found nothing. The story appeared a few more times in the press and in works of fiction before fading into obscurity. Frankly, it all sounds like a sensationalized newspaper hoax, especially since the only person who described it in detail was the journalist Emmett Keller in the Halifax Herald. Over the years, the legend of Anjikuni Village grew, gaining all kinds of details. But if we discard ideas about flying saucers or evil spirits, where could the people have gone, if they were even there at all? Yes, there's no evidence that the village ever existed. But even so, it's most likely that the people simply moved to a new location. They left behind their old houses with some belongings and just relocated. And here's the cherry on top. In 1988, retired RCMP officers couldn't recall the story at all. Not even the fact that a man named Joe LaBelle had approached them. No documents, no protocols, nothing. Of course, stories about mysterious disappearances have always existed, and always will. But in these cases, it's always hard to say what's true and what isn't. The mystery of the next object has always intrigued chemists much more than ordinary people. Each of us knows that any iron eventually oxidizes, rusts, and deteriorates. But it turns out not all iron. In 415 AD, an enormous iron pillar was erected in honor of Chandragupta II, one of India's most renowned rulers. Originally placed in front of a temple, it was later moved to Delhi in 1050 AD by King Anangpala, where it still stands today. This towering column is 23.6 feet tall and weighs 6.5 metric tons. But why iron? Why not stone or marble? The answer is quite simple. Iron was extremely valuable in the 5th century. Constructing a pillar from such an expensive material symbolized the great wealth of ancient India. The mystery of the Delhi pillar lies elsewhere. In its 1600 years of existence, it has not rusted. In fact, it rusts so slowly that it's hardly noticeable. Imagine how many legends this phenomenon has started. The most logical explanation is that the pillar is made of stainless steel. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Unfortunately, no signs of stainless steel were found in the pillar. What about meteorite iron? It rusts very slowly. Why not? But meteorite iron always contains nickel. When in 2000, Indian scientist Balasubramaniam conducted a detailed chemical analysis of the pillar, he found that the pillar contained 99.7% iron, with small amounts of carbon, silicon, sulfur, phosphorus, and nitrogen. So there's absolutely no nickel in the pillar. What other theories are there? Well, perhaps it's a natural protective layer, a film from leftover slag, or maybe the oils and incense used during religious rituals helped preserve it. But the most plausible explanation is a combination of two key factors: the phosphorus content and the climate. Phosphorus enhances a metal's resistance to corrosion. Now, let's recall where the pillar has stood for the past 1,500 years. In Delhi, one of the driest cities in the world. Where could rust come from if even dew doesn't form there? This seems very plausible, given that the underground part of the pillar does rust away. However, the exposed section, constantly bathed in hot, dry air, has remained practically untouched for centuries. It seems that science has finally solved this ancient mystery. When it comes to this next site, we can speculate endlessly, but a definitive answer would require nothing less than a time machine. Meet Superhenge. No, not Stonehenge, but Superhenge. Though they are located close to each other and may very well be connected. By the way, if you didn't know, the term henge refers to a specific type of circular Neolithic monument. These structures are found almost exclusively in the British Isles. Superhenge gets its name primarily because of its sheer size. The circle measures 1,600 feet in diameter, making it the second largest henge ever discovered. It sits 2 miles northeast of Stonehenge. First, in the early 2000s, archaeologists from the University of Sheffield uncovered evidence of a large prehistoric settlement nearby. Then, by 2010, they stumbled upon the henge itself. It was a groundbreaking discovery, a massive structure dating back to 2400 BC, remarkably well preserved. But the real surprise came in 2015 when geophysical research revealed that 90 standing stones were hidden beneath Superhenge's surface. Professor Mike Parker Pearson's team from University College London was thrilled and began excavations the following year, only to encounter yet another surprise. The supposed stones turned out to be pits filled with chalk. Some of the pits contained remnants of wooden posts. Then in 2021, archaeologists from Bradford University, led by Vincent Gaffney, confirmed that these pits were dug and later intentionally filled in by humans. This meant one thing: Superhenge was never actually made of stone. It was a wooden monument that was never completed. For some reason, its builders abandoned the project and dismantled it. But why? Dr. Nick Snashall, senior archaeologist of the National Trust, believes the project was halted due to a shift in religious beliefs at the time. In fact, henges are generally associated with either religious rituals, astronomical observations, or both. Some scholars like Parker Pearson suggest a direct connection between Superhenge and Stonehenge. In this theory, Superhenge represents the realm of the living, while Stonehenge symbolizes the world of the dead. And they may have been used for burial ceremonies. But perhaps henges had nothing to do with the stars or religion at all. Until we master time travel, we may never know for certain. One thing, however, is clear. These ancient circles remain incredibly fascinating and crucial to our understanding of human history. The next site, despite being called the American Stonehenge, has no actual connection to the real henges. Located in the state of New Hampshire, USA, this peculiar site has sparked controversy since its discovery. In 1937, an insurance manager named William Goodwin purchased a plot of land, which he named Mystery Hill. The land contained a circle of stones and several stone caves. Goodwin was the first to promote the idea that these stones were proof that Europeans had lived in America before Columbus. His reasoning was something like this: there are stones in America, and there are similar ones in Britain. So who could have placed them in America? The ancient Celts, or perhaps even wandering Irish monks. The sensational claim soon reached the press, and in 1982, a research team led by David Stewart Smith conducted excavations at Mystery Hill. By then, the site had already been unofficially dubbed America's Stonehenge. As a result of the research, the scientists concluded that the stones had been handled by Native Americans. Stone tools and fragments of pottery were found, all suggesting that they had originally built the site. The American Stonehenge is essentially an astronomical site with a lunar calendar. In the early 2000s, Curtis Runnels, a professor of archaeology at the University of California, Santa Cruz, discredited the theory of pre-Columbian European civilization in America. He argued that many of the stones had been moved by none other than the site's owner, William Goodwin himself, meaning any conclusions about the site's construction were highly questionable. Furthermore, no evidence of Irish monks arriving by sea was found. Not a single artifact, not a bronze knife, not a pot, nor a coin. Items commonly found near Stonehenge. According to Runnels, the sacrificial stone uncovered during the excavation looks much more like a colonial-era apple press or soap-making vat. A third, far less mysterious theory has also been proposed, suggesting that America's Stonehenge is simply the remnants of an 18th century colonial farm, but the stone calendar doesn't quite fit into this hypothesis. It's possible that America's Stonehenge preserves traces of two distinct periods: an ancient indigenous astronomical site, later repurposed as a colonial farm with caves for food storage and a soap press. However, the idea of rewriting world history based on this site is dead in the water. Now let's turn to a site that's undeniably ancient. It was constructed around 3300 BC. We're talking about the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, an underground temple discovered in the town of Paula on the island of Malta. Malta's prehistoric civilization was deeply rooted in religious cults. The island is home to many prehistoric stone temples, 6 of which are collectively recognized as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Several more temples are not included, as they were damaged due to agricultural expansion in the 19th century. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni was discovered during sewer construction in 1902 and was even used as a dumping ground for waste for a long time. Eventually, the Maltese recognized its significance, and in 1980 it was officially added to the UNESCO World Heritage List as a separate site. But what makes it so special? In fact, it's not just a temple, it's a hypogeum, meaning an underground temple. The name itself, Hal Saflieni, translates to low village. The temple consists of 34 artificial chambers carved into the stone. There's a theory that the natural caves existed there first, and ancient builders simply expanded and refined them. The chambers were dug from the top to bottom, meaning the lower levels are newer. There are 3 levels in total, with the second level being the most intriguing for researchers, but more on that later. Additionally, Hal Saflieni served as a mass burial site. The upper level of the temple is filled with burial chambers containing human remains. The Hypogeum was used as a necropolis up until about 2500 BC. While the upper level's purpose is clear, the second level in the middle remains a mystery. It features a sophisticated lighting system, seemingly designed to align with the movement of the sun. There, archaeologists found a special room with unusual acoustics and named it the Oracle Chamber. Sounds spoken in this room resonate throughout the entire Hypogeum, especially when spoken in a deep voice. In addition, archaeologists found ochre-painted wall decorations, along with intricately carved figurines, pottery, and other artifacts, some crafted with an astonishing level of precision. You may wonder what's so mysterious about it. Well, nothing, except that all of this was built by prehistoric humans during the Stone Age. Perfectly round chambers, acoustic systems. Scientists have been trying to explain these inconsistencies since excavations began in 1903, and the mystery continues to this day. Some rumors claim that the lower level extends into endless tunnels, where descendants of an ancient civilization may still hide. Perhaps we are indeed underestimating our ancestors, but in any case, excavations of the Hypogeum continue, and new secrets are still waiting to be uncovered. The discovery of our next archaeological wonder required no digging at all. In fact, the first people to encounter these objects literally stumbled over them. In the 1930s in Costa Rica, the United Fruit Company was clearing jungle land for banana plantations. On one of their sites, workers came across strange-looking stones. They were of various sizes, but most importantly, they were round, perfectly spherical stones. But instead of marveling at their uniqueness, the workers treated them as obstacles. Some were pushed aside by heavy machinery, others were blown up with dynamite, and some were even drilled holes in, as someone unfortunately remembered the legend of El Dorado, leading the workers to search for gold inside the stones. Unsurprisingly, no gold was found, but these reckless actions caused irreparable damage to many of the spheres. Fortunately, Doris Stone, the daughter of a United Fruit Company executive and an archaeologist and ethnographer, took a much more responsible approach. In 1943, she studied the spheres, and by 1948, Samuel Lothrop from Harvard University joined her research. As a result of their combined efforts, it was confirmed that these stone spheres were man-made, carefully shaped and polished. Most were carved from gabbro, a type of hardened magma, while others were made of limestone and sandstone. The spheres likely date back to the Diquis civilization, which arrived in pre-Columbian Costa Rica. Over the years of exploration, more than 300 spheres have been discovered across Costa Rica, ranging from the size of a tennis ball to giants weighing up to 15 metric tons. However, only one location in the Diquis Valley has preserved them in their original arrangement. These spheres were placed in rows, circles, or semicircles at the sites of major ancient settlements. They date from 200 BC to 1500 AD. Today, the spheres can be found in museums, in front of government buildings, and even on private lawns. New ones are still being discovered in the jungle and during excavations. They've been included in UNESCO's World Heritage List and are considered a unique monument to a vanished civilization. One question remains: why were they made? Why did the pre-Columbian peoples of Costa Rica create and transport massive stone spheres across the country? Given that much of them have already been scattered by their descendants, it's hard to say for sure. There are several hypotheses. The first and most obvious one suggests a connection to the sky and astronomy. Perhaps the stones were arranged to form constellations or something like a calendar. However, they don't match any known constellations. That's all we can say about that. According to the second theory, they were projectiles, evidence of military activity. But hurling a 15-ton sphere would require an impossibly large catapult, and why would battle projectiles be carefully arranged in rows afterward? This theory doesn't add up. An interesting idea came from Melissa Rudin Hernandez, an architect from Costa Rica who studied the cosmology of indigenous people. She believes the spheres might have a sacred meaning, representing the creation of the universe and the center of the world, which aligns well with the culture of the Diquis. So, which theory is correct? Archaeologists continue to search for more spheres and the answer to their mystery. Finally, let's dive back underwater, this time off the coast of Japan. In 1985, Kihachiro Eraric, director of the Yonaguni Island Tourism Association, was searching for a good shark watching spot where tourists could observe hammerhead sharks. Instead, at a depth of 16 feet, he discovered something that strongly resembled a sunken city: stairs, pyramids, roads, and so on. Amazed by his finds, Eraric quickly shared the news with the public. First, a research team from the University of Ryukyus, led by Misaki Kamura, arrived on Yonaguni. Their study uncovered clear signs of human presence before the site was submerged. Specifically, they discovered classic archaeological artifacts, stones with symbols, bas-reliefs, and tools. From this, they concluded that humanity had uncovered another man-made Atlantis. This idea resonated with the Japanese legend, which speaks of the lost continent of Mu. But as often happens with ancient mysteries, this was just one side of the story. In 1997, a second research team arrived to study the Yonaguni monument. This second group included geologist Robert Schoch, a professor from Boston University, writers, divers, and even TV journalists. Their conclusions were completely different from the first theory. Schoch argued that no humans were involved in the creation of the site. It was a natural formation. It's well known that Japan is an extremely seismically active region with frequent earthquakes, including underwater ones. Furthermore, the ruins of Yonaguni were composed of sandstone, a type of rock that naturally fractures along geometric lines. In his view, these natural fractures had simply created walls, roads, and terraces that only appeared man-made. But wait, if the monument was completely natural, how do we explain the artifacts found nearby? So, who is right? This is one of those cases where everyone is right. The monument itself is most likely a natural formation. However, this area was once above sea level, part of a land bridge between Japan and present-day Taiwan. People definitely lived here until rising sea levels submerged the site around 10,000 years ago. Yonaguni became an island, and the land where the monument now stands sank. The Japanese government officially accepted Schoch's explanation, classifying the monument as a natural geological formation rather than a cultural site. But that hasn't stopped tourists and divers from admiring it. Anyone can explore this mysterious underwater wonder. All it takes is a flight to the Japanese islands and a diving suit.